Tonight, Question Time has come to Shrewsbury in the beautiful county of Shropshire. Our audience, as always, reflects the electoral picture across the nation. Welcome to Question Time on the BBC News Channel, on the iPlayer and BBC Sounds. From Darren Jones recently as number 2 in the Treasury in Keir Starmer's latest reshuffle. For the Conservatives, the Shadow Culture Secretary Nigel Huddleston, a former Google executive who became an MP in 2015 and helped run Kemi Badenoch's leadership campaign. Making his Question Time debut, the new leader of the Green Party, Zach Polansky, a self-confessed eco-populist who, among a number of policies, wants to tax the rich and legalise hard drugs. For Reform UK, Zia Youssef, the self-made millionaire who swapped business for politics and is now the party's head of policy. And the Daily Telegraph columnist Annabel Denham, who says there's now true equality at the top of politics, the right for men and women to be equally hopeless. Welcome to the programme. Here we are in Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury. Yes, depending on how you say it, as I've been informed. Welcome to the panel and welcome to our audience here, and of course, welcome to you at home. Do join in the conversation on social media if you feel so moved, otherwise just sit back and watch. Right, let's take our first question tonight, which is from Henry Whitaker.
Was Robert Jenrick right to complain about not seeing a white face in Handsworth?
So Robert Jenrick, who is the Shadow Secretary of State for Justice, a former immigration minister, made some comments which were leaked. Made these comments relatively recently, saying that Handsworth in Birmingham, which is just about, an hour from here, was one of the worst integrated places he'd ever been to, that he hadn't seen another white face, and that that's not the kind of country I want to live in. Since you asked the question, Henry, what's your view?
My view is we've never heard anyone complain about not seeing a black face or pain. So... basically...
You weren't happy with it?
No.
OK. Nigel?
Yeah, I think the comments were made a few months ago, but Robert has stood by them and defended them on the basis that it was a statement of fact of his experience of walking around that area. Now, none of us were with him, but if he was making that statement, then I think that's a fair statement to make. What was most important, the bit that probably hasn't been talked about so much, is the commentary he said after about the concern that raised about the lack of integration, and that he would like to see more societies and more parts of the world, and in particular, some of our major cities, where it is obviously and transparently more diverse, therefore signalling integration to the degree that he would like to see for, I think he specifically mentioned, for his children, for example. So I think that was a fair point to make. Now, people may disagree with the language that Robert used. He's a very robust individual, but I say it was a statement of fact of his observation, making, I think, quite an important point about the lack of...
Did you agree or disagree with his language?
Well, I can't disagree with... he was making a statement of fact about what he saw, so that's for Robert to say, and he's better support him on that. I think the important thing, and quite frankly, it's good in some ways, we're now having a debate about the very point he was raising on integration or lack of in British society, and it is a concern.
Okay. Woman, there was a woman there who had her hand up. There you are. Yes, we're slightly further back.
Handsworth has kind of always been a place that has been produced such amazing culture with poets like Benjamin Zephaniah, Steel Pulses. I think to say that it's poorly integrated into our society is just... it's unfair when it's produced such amazing, talent and art.
OK. What about the man here in the front?
I'm from Birmingham originally, and I've worked in Handsworth many a time. And I can honestly say, someone to come into my city, spend 90 minutes there and make that sort of statement is totally... The way the country is at the moment, how does that make the people who live in Handsworth, work in Handsworth, the people of Birmingham feel?
I think you're making a really important point there, because, by the way, I'm a West Midlands MP. I spend a lot of time in Birmingham. Birmingham is an incredibly diverse and vibrant city. He was talking about the very specific area he was going in. Wasn't saying the whole thing about Birmingham, and actually we do celebrate diversity. That was the point. So I do spend a lot of time in Birmingham.
He's talking about Robert Gentry spending 90 minutes there.
Look, I mean...
He doesn't know Handsworth.
Well, Robert himself...
He doesn't know the people of Birmingham, and he doesn't know Handsworth. He spent 90 minutes.
Robert was actually born in the West Midlands.
He was born in Wolverhampton.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I believe he lives in a village of less than 200 people with one coloured black face.
Let's go around.
It says it all.
Zach.
I hear your anger, and I think you're right to be angry. I think we should all be angry when we had 14 years of Conservative austerity that shut our libraries, shut our community centres. And then to say integration is a problem. How do you expect people to integrate if you've taken away their services? Now, look, I'm going to Handsworth tomorrow. I think it's important that a political leader of a party actually goes to speak to people and spends time with people. The Green Party spoke to Benjamin Zephaniah's wife today about using his poem, British. For those of you who don't know the poem, it's a beautiful poem that talks about what multiculturalism is, what it is to bring people together. I'm so glad you've asked this question, Henry, because ultimately we need to make sure that all politicians are speaking about migration in positive sense. Now, of course, there will be people who have problems with migration, but their problems are because they can't get a dentist appointment, because there's not enough council homes, because we've not invested in our communities. But none of these are problems of a black face. These are the problems of multimillionaires and billionaires and the politicians who haven't taxed them properly. We can change that. They're all political choices. Let's make different political choices.
Zia.
Well, look, there are massive issues with integration in this country. I think that is a fact, and I think many people in this country, ordinary, hard-working, lovely British people, feel concerned, quite rightly, about integration in this country. I think Robert Jenrick is not necessarily the best exponent of those concerns, given he served in that Tory government as immigration minister, no less, when 6.5 million net new people were shipped in over 14 years of their government, against the wishes of the British people who voted against such mass immigration time and time again. Look, it is a fact that there are serious issues with immigration in this country. There are serious issues with integration in this country, in no small part because we had 11 million people gross, 6.5 million net new people arrived, fewer hospital beds. The Tories left the country with fewer hospital beds than when they arrived. They left the country with 400 net new prison places. That is why people are so fearful about getting sick right now. That is why people are fearful of crime, and so many violent criminals have to be released early because we lack the prison space. So the Tories catastrophically mismanaged the country. And as bad as this Labour government are, nobody is more accountable for that than the Tories.
And they're in the check shirt.
Massive issues with integration, Mr Youssef. That's such a generalisation and such a polarised thing to say. The British public deserve better than that, to be honest. The vast majority of people in this country live very happily and very peacefully together. The Tories have done a terrible job. One other thing that Mr Jenrick said was that Handsworth is a slum. It's a slum possibly due to 14 years of terrible Tory rule in this country. But, Mr Youssef, tonight you will say everything is about immigration. I challenge you not to mention the word immigration tonight. Because not everything in this country is the problem of immigration. There are problems in this country, but it's not just immigration.
Yeah, well, listen, I'll respond to that directly. I'm afraid I am going to mention immigration because it is, according to the latest YouGov poll, the number one issue for ordinary British people, for voters across this great country. Of course, it's not the only issue. I couldn't agree with that more. And as someone, by the way, who's a second-generation immigrant, whose parents came to this country in the early 1980s, and I'd like to think have contributed. They're given half a century of service between them to the NHS, still practice in their 70s at the NHS. And before people accuse me of not retiring them, all the money in my pockets could not stop them from giving care, because that's who they are. I am proud of what my parents have contributed to this country. I know how much immigrants have contributed, but it is absolutely true that there has been far too much mass immigration in this country. It has been to the detriment of this country. We've had enormous numbers. The Tories are most culpable for that, but I'm afraid the Labour government are, frankly, pouring gasoline on that problem.
Sia, do you ever think it's the number one problem because you spend a lot of time spreading misinformation and fear to make it...
What is it that I just said? Zach, with respect, you just accused me of spreading misinformation. Please tell me, and the people watching at home, what is it that I just said?
Because you've said the first bit, which is correct, that we don't have enough prison spaces, that we don't have enough NHS beds, and that we don't have investment in our communities. What immigrant has taken away those resources, as opposed to those resources being funded? So you can't blame austerity on one hand, but then say it's the immigrants. The immigrants haven't caused austerity. The same Thatcherite policies that you and your party support, and the Conservatives, of what have caused the devastation in this country. And you should take responsibility for that too.
Do you think that 6.5 million net new people arriving inside 14 years, 11 million gross new people arriving in this country, against the wishes of the British people, by the way, who voted against such things in 4 consecutive elections, you tell me, you don't think that's going to put pressure on public services?
Well, first of all, we were told Brexit would bring down immigration. Actually, what it's done is brought up immigration.
And you can blame the Tories for that.
So there was a mess that Nigel Farage started with that when he gave misinformation
I
to the
don't
public.
believe Nigel Farage was in government for those 14 years.
Oh, yeah, I think he was pretty around, though, and on Question Time quite.
He was not in government, I'm afraid.
OK.
All right, tell you what. Should we hear a bit more from our audience? Man in the blue sweater.
When it comes to integration, why don't we stop talking about the colour of people's skin and start talking about shared values and social cohesion to start to bring the country back together? What are the panel's thought on that?
OK, and let me just hear from the woman behind you as well in the glasses.
Hello. I was just thinking that if Robert Jenrick came to Shrewsbury and spent an hour, he would probably say there's no black faces, but it's just a generalisation. It has no bearing whatsoever on the integration within our country.
James.
I think a lot of members of the audience have put their points really well this evening. And actually, when the gentleman on the front row was speaking just a few moments ago, talking about Robert Jenrick turning up in somewhere that he just talked down the people there, talked down the place, it made me deeply uncomfortable to see that happening. And actually, people who know the area well, like yourself and like others who have spoken, and Andy Street, the former mayor of West Midlands, he actually said it's an example of a really well-integrated place. So I think there are people who know the area well who are talking positively about what the area has to offer. And I felt really uncomfortable seeing how Robert Jenrick approached it. Now,
Did you also feel uncomfortable when Keir Starmer talked about the United Kingdom risking becoming an island of strangers? He wasn't talking about Handsworth in particular, he was talking about the entire nation.
Well, the point he was making is about social cohesion, and that's actually a point which is being raised here tonight. And look, a lot of people here have talked about integration. And when people are talking about integration, integration is an important question for us to have. We're investing £5 billion in local places to give local people that power over the local areas. But actually, it's not just about government. This question about integration is not just about government ministers coming along and saying what we're going to do, as important as that is. It's also about all politicians, about people in the media, about all of us in our daily lives, playing our role in having a more empathetic society where we look after our neighbours, we have respect for each other, and we operate as one country.
All right, let me just hear from some more people. Yes, the man there in the glasses.
I'm from Liverpool originally, which is a very multicultural city. I've lived in Birmingham for almost 10 years, or previously, and I work there at the moment. I've never felt that there are areas that are not approachable. I thought that the language that Robert Jenrick used was... It's endemic of the society that we live in now. It's driving divisiveness. The Reform Party is at the head of that table. The Conservatives haven't done very much for that. But I'd like to hear the panel say how we can move away from being as divisive with our language and how we can try and bring more inclusivity.
All right, let me hear a bit more. Yes, man at the back there.
Yeah, I guess my biggest takeaway from the discussion so far on this is that both Kemi Badenoch on Radio 4 earlier this week and now our Conservative panel member here tonight both defend vehemently Robert Jenrick's comments. And then we have Mr Yousaf, who not only is happy now throwing petrol on flames of immigration, but expands the issue to integration. Apparently we live in a very badly integrated country. I lived in Shrewsbury now for about 5 years, and I've lived in Shropshire for about 30 years. I think we here have seen an increase in the number of immigrants living in Shrewsbury. When I first moved to Shropshire, it was a whites-only area. Now, happily, we see a mixture of cultures, and I'm happy that I'm living here in a culture which is becoming more enriched. As somebody else has said, I think if Mr Jenrick had spent 90 minutes in Shrewsbury 10 years ago, would he have said, oh my goodness, this is a dreadful place, there are no black faces, it's not a country I want my children to grow up in?
Annabelle, so Henry's question was Robert Jenrick right to complain about not seeing another white face in Handsworth? But we've had two people now saying, what about the language and the divisiveness of language?
Well, I've actually found the response to Robert Jenrick's comments very troubling, because I think for too long people in Britain have not felt that they are able to speak out about concerns that they may have over immigration. That might be the numbers, the fact that in one single year we had net migration of 906,000 people coming here, not all of whom are going to be net contributors to our economy, but also people are concerned about the failures of integration. And yes, certainly relative to other Western European countries, we are a very successful multi-ethnic society, but I don't think anybody can deny that there is more work that needs to be done. And when politicians stick their head above the parapet and they express some of these views, and perhaps you might find the language that Robert Jenrick used specifically distasteful, but when they're then pilloried and there's an enormous backlash, it makes it that bit more difficult for somebody else to come out and speak about it and express fears that they may harbour. And I think that is, as a consequence, too often pushes debate and discussion underground, and it pushes people who have often very legitimate concerns over immigration into the arms of far-right figures like Tommy Robinson.
Man there in the glasses. Yes, you, sir.
I'm originally from Mexico. My family is here with me since 8 years ago. We went through the whole process of Tier 2 visa, indefinitely leave to remain. Now we are citizens. And I can tell you for sure that the integration that we have, my sons, it's perfect. The welcoming of the country has been fantastic. And in the company that I work for, we have a lot of people that are from different places. So my experience here is that we can have a very good integration. I don't know why we keep insisting in divisive language and saying that is not happening, because it's happening.
And there, in the black top.
I think immigration and migration is always the political football, and there's no answers for anything else. The NHS is on its knees. Social care is a major important thing to be looking at in the future. AI itself having an influence on jobs in the future for people that are up and coming and younger. Where's all the plans and all the arguments coming from the policy and different parties from that? There isn't anything. All they want to do is throw the immigration football around and just blame the migrants all the time.
Do you think there's too much about that?
I'm sick of hearing about it. People are aware that people are coming in. We've heard it for years. Every time there's nothing to be answered about, they just throw the immigration thing out again. And that's why the Reform Party is the answer, because of the immigration being an important thing to think about.
Can I just come in here? I think there's a couple of things I'd just like to say. First of all, if any of you had listened to the whole discussion that Robert Jenrick had, if any of you listened to Robert Jenrick's debate and discussion at Conservative Party conference, which we probably should have been talking about, you'd get a completely different feeling and a message of tolerance and inclusivity. That was the point. Maybe we ought to wonder why it is that during Conservative Party conference, a leaked message came out on a very minute thing, on a specific area, out of context, and was then sent to the media during Conservative Party conference. Come on, we're not that stupid. There is a reason why somebody did that, instead of, and to stop us talking about the positive things, for example, that we talked about at Conservative Party conference, or indeed all the other party conferences, in order to divide. It's exactly the point that has been made here. Some people play things in order to cause division, and we shouldn't be playing at that. And actually, if you were at our conference, you would have heard a different message.
It's all okay to talk about it at political parties. Talk about it in Parliament and get things through.
Yeah.
Sort things out.
Yeah. And believe me, look,
answer.
and the conversation we've had today, I hear in my constituency all the time. We do engage. Immigration is a big issue, but we're talking about a much broader variety of things here this afternoon.
Woman at the back.
This week, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say, I too come from South East London originally, lived in Shropshire for nearly 30 years, and I love the fact that this is not a purely white town. I love Shropshire, I love Shrewsbury. The other side to it is there are hundreds of people in this county who would not receive any social care at all, or any care, if we didn't have people coming to work in this county from other countries, and I welcome them all and say thank you.
So, look, it's great. You know, we've obviously had a lot of people in this audience asking questions who clearly are delighted about the levels of immigration, and that's fine, like, genuinely great. But I'm afraid this audience is not representative of the country. And right now, many people in this great country...
It is representative of the support for reform, I might just point out.
Many people in this country feel massively betrayed by the Conservative Party, who, by the way, in their 2010 manifesto, their 2015 manifesto, their 2017 manifesto, their 2019 manifesto said they would bring net migration down to the tens of thousands. Instead, they left office with that number at over 1 million, and 6.5 million net new people arrived inside their 14 years of government. And let's talk about the health service, because, again, this is a lie that is peddled. You could restaff every doctor and nurse in the NHS, which is close to my heart because my parents have given their life to it. You could restaff every doctor and nurse with just 1 year's net immigration based on the rate of the last 3 years. And there is currently an employment crisis for doctors in this country. Look at the British Medical Association, who are on their knees pleading with the government, saying half of the homegrown British doctors who are in their foundation year do not have a job. Let me say that again. Half of the homegrown British doctors in their foundation year do not have a job to go to. So, I'm sorry, the notion, and I don't in any way misunderstand why people take the view, because it is a lie that is peddled. The notion that the NHS needs more immigration to function is the opposite of the truth. The NHS is in part buckling under the pressure of enormous health tourism that is happening, and our own doctors, our own British doctors who are struggling, and the BMA's on its knees right now begging the government to create more training places for them, because there's 50% of them, according to the BMA, you can look it up on their website, do not have jobs.
OK, I'm going to move on. I know you want to come to that, but you'll definitely get your chance. Right, I'm going to take another question now, but before I do, I just want to say where we are next week, which is Bishop Stortford in Hertfordshire. The week after that, we're off to Swindon. So if you live in or near either of those areas, Bishop Stortford or Swindon, you want to come and be part of the audience, ask your questions, go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there, and hopefully we will see you. Right, let's take another question. Big story of the day. Robert Cumming.
If Donald Trump does get peace deal in Gaza, will the left-leaning party policies, will they finally admit that he's the Don done good?
Has the Don done good? Well, I think the Don thinks he's done good. There's not much doubt about that. James?
Well, we should definitely recognise President Trump's role in what's happening in the Middle East. And we should recognise the fact that us working with him and with other partners around the world is the way that we have now got to this position. And, can I just say that we've had so many false dawns in terms of getting a ceasefire, getting hostages out, getting aid in over the last 2 years, that I almost dare not to hope that this is a real breakthrough. But it does feel a bit different. It does feel there is a glimmer of real hope in what has been announced in the last 24, 36 hours. And, I just hope so deeply that this is a ceasefire that lasts and all the hostages are released and aid gets in, and then we get on that pathway towards a two-state solution with a safe and secure Israel alongside a Palestinian state, which we know is the way to have long-lasting peace in the region. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
Are you saying that you contributed to this peace deal? Are you saying the Labour government contributed to it?
The Prime Minister has been playing a role with international partners.
Well, Secretary Rubio in Trump's cabinet has come out publicly saying that the early and, in their view, premature recognition of a Palestinian state actively set back the peace deal.
The recognition,
do you want to apologise?
The recognition. Let me take this head on. Right, the recognition of the state of Palestine was a decision that we took along with other international partners. Other countries did the recognition
not America.
Around the same time as that we did, and that's important.
You all made a bad decision.
It's important to have a collaboration with international partners when we're talking about what's happening in the Middle East. And the reason why we did that, the reason why we decided to recognise Palestine at this stage, is to make sure that we keep alive that prospect, that hope of a two-state solution.
So Secretary Rubio literally said that recognising Palestine prematurely
Palestinian state
back
alongside Israel is the way to have
long-term
peace and security for both the Palestinians and the Israelis.
I should say that we're recording this programme before the Israeli cabinet has finished meeting and signed off on this ceasefire deal. I'm saying that just in case it all goes pear-shaped, but I'm obviously fervently hoping that it does not. Zach, is it time for left-leaning political parties, that's why I'm coming to James and to you first, is it time they admit the Don done good?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that Israel's ongoing genocide has resulted on average in a classroom of children dying every single day in Palestine. 55,000 children are malnourished, so of course a ceasefire should be welcomed. But also let's be clear about who Donald Trump is. Not only is he a racist misogynist, he's someone who said that Gaza should be turned into a luxury Riviera. So I don't think for a second we should pretend that he wants a ceasefire because he cares about Palestinian lives all of a sudden. He wants a ceasefire. I think, second, whilst welcoming the ceasefire, we also know this is really a three-stage process. We need this ceasefire as quick as possible, but we also then need to talk about peace. And we need to make sure we're bringing everyone around the table. And I think our role in that is making sure that Palestinian voices are heard in the same way that Israeli voices are heard. And the idea that Tony Blair is going to be at the head of this table is like bringing an arsonist to put out a fire. It just makes absolutely no sense at all. And actually, we need to make sure that the right people, the people on the ground from the grassroots, are the people leading this. And then thirdly, I think there does need to be a reckoning. We need to recognise that this has been a stain on our humanity, our global humanity. And our government has not just been complicit. They have actively enabled with the selling of arms to Israel. It's time to stop the genocide, stop sharing intelligence, and make sure we have a free Palestine. Thank you.
Can I just... Robert, where are you sitting? I've lost track of where you are. Can we just get a microphone back to Robert? What's your view?
Yeah, I'm no big fan of Trump, but I mean, if it does work, then you've got to give him some sort of credit. And yeah, he probably is doing it for himself, his own ego. But who cares if it brings peace? It doesn't matter, does it?
Okay, man here in the stripy t-shirt.
Couldn't we have reached this point a lot quicker if Trump and Starmer and all the politicians had put more pressure on Israel to actually stop the genocide in Gaza? I mean, it is a genocide because the UN says so.
Could we have got there quicker? Nigel?
I don't think we could have got there quicker because Hamas was not releasing the hostages. And actually, the British government could have put pressure when they unilaterally, when they declared declaration recognising Palestine. Why didn't they put and release the hostages as a condition? Why didn't they put conditions on Hamas? They didn't. That was ridiculous.
Okay with,
that was.
With Israel
of course, I'm not. Sir, please don't.
Not members of Hamas.
Sir, of course I am not.
Okay, who did nothing wrong.
Of course I am not. Please don't put words in my mouth. I'm saying actually we could have helped move things forward if actually we'd said, you know, at some point or some alternative thing, part of the hostages were part of the deal. They weren't. I think that was absolutely terrible. And all the other countries, just because others joined in and did the same, they were all wrong. Doesn't make it right just because other people do stupid things as well. It's a bit more complicated than that. In terms of the answer to the question, the gentleman's right. Donald Trump transparently deserves some credit for this because he's probably the only person in the world who could help actually get us to this point, along with and working with, of course, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey and others. But this is a horrendous situation. I'm really pleased that we've got to this point. But as somebody who's met the parents of hostages, and I was in Israel and Palestine, by the way, a few weeks ago, I have seen the harm and the damage on both sides. I am relieved and encouraged. It looks like we are now going to see an end of solution. But let's be clear here. There was a ceasefire. It was broken on the 7th of October when Hamas conducted terrorist attacks.
Woman at the back there in the glass.
I've been to Israel and I've been to the West Bank several times over the years, and I've met some really, really wonderful Jewish people. I met some really, really wonderful Palestinian people. And I've encountered some very scary extremists on both sides. Mm-hmm. But what we have here today from Donald Trump are words. It's deeds, not words. The detail behind what happens after today, and I really do pray today that that ceasefire happens, is the devil in the detail. Is this going to be a long-term lasting peace? I really don't know. I really pray they do. But until we recognise as individuals, as people who live, just trying to live their daily lives on both sides, and to try and understand the impact on both sides, and to put to one side the labels that we so happily slap on people, and we just see Jew and Muslim and Israeli and Palestinian and Christian, and we actually talk about what that means and the detail and the complexity behind that, then they haven't got a hope of anybody truly understanding the other person's point of view. It's too political. It's too much about the easy slap on the labels, and we need to think about the people it affects on both sides.
Dear. Is it time for the left-leaning political parties to admit that Don done good?
Well, look, in my lifetime, I think this is the closest we have come to an enduring peace in the Middle East in my lifetime. I think that is an incredible thing. Of course there's more work to do. Are there ways this could go wrong from here? Of course. But the fact that we are in this situation is something to behold. I'm personally hugely grateful for it. I think if it succeeds, and again, we are closer to that success than ever, certainly, again, in recent history, I think huge credit then must go to President Trump. I want to reiterate, though, the notion that Labour have in any way contributed to this, when literally Secretary Rubio has gone on the record to explicitly say that the early, in their view, premature recognition of a Palestinian state set back the process is important. But yes, look, I echo that perspective, that there has been untold suffering on both sides, and it is enormously hopeful right now, and I really hope President Trump succeeds.
So the Nobel Peace Prize Committee announce who they are going to award that prize to tomorrow. Now, Donald Trump has made no secret that he says lots of people tell him he should get it. You kind of get the impression he thinks he should get it as well. Should he, Zia?
I think that's a decision for the committee to make.
But of course it is. But do you think he should get it?
All right. So you know what? Let's talk about this.
Come on.
President Obama was awarded that award. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in his first year of his presidency, and his own words, in Obama's own words, he said, "For what?" I think is objectively and decisively true. That what President Trump, like him or loathe him, if you will just look at the objective facts, the peace accords across the Middle East, which he got no credit for whatsoever, and I understand why people have concerns about President Trump, but if you look at it objectively, if President Trump won it, I think it's very difficult to make an argument that President Trump doesn't deserve it.
Annabelle.
Well, just those 2 points. First, should Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize? No, I don't think he should, because whilst he's being sensible on Ukraine now, what he has done since becoming US president for a second time is embolden Putin, is encourage aggression, and made it more difficult for there to be a resolution to that conflict. This is not a peacemaking president for all of his potential in getting that agreement over the line in the Middle East, which, of course, we should absolutely all cautiously welcome. But to the question about whether Don has done good specifically on the issue of Israel and Gaza, yes, I think he has, and I think these developments completely discredit the actions that we've seen of the left in Britain and the way in which they have fueled anti-Semitism in this country to such a degree that 1 in 5 people now hold views which are considered to be anti-Semitic, which personally I find absolutely horrifying. It has also discredited the Starmer administration, which over the course of the last 2 years, since that terrible pogrom on October the 7th, has treated one of our great allies and the democracy surrounded by a ring of fire in the Middle East as though it's some sort of adversary. So we have suspended certain arms sales. We have recognised Palestinian statehood, which, as Zia says, has made peace that much more difficult to achieve. And it would be rather nice if we could hear some sort of apology or see some sort of contrition from those who have contributed and behaved in this way.
Zach, you wanted to come in?
Yes. So I'm Jewish, and the reason why that's relevant is I'm one of 5 Jewish people to lead a British political party in the last 100 years. So I take anti-Semitism really seriously, in the same way that I take Islamophobia seriously, because I recognise when they come for one minority group, they come for all of us. And I was really proud of Shrewsbury from the conversation we had earlier about migration and integration, because I think what we're hearing here about the compassion and the kindness towards the other reflects the very best of being British. You can be, in fact, the only way to be morally consistent is to condemn what happened on October 7th and the terrorist attack against civilians, and condemn the genocide in Palestine. Because as...
Your deputy leader has done nothing of the sort. He's stoked the flames in his comments. I don't know how you could say that. The idea that the Greens are nice, fluffy bunnies. The day after the 7th of October, he made inflammatory comments, undeniably inflammatory comments. Now, after people questioned him, he did then come back and apologise for them.
Can
which
you
I
tell
think
us what
you're
those
aware
inflammatory
of.
comments
I don't
were?
have the quote here, but honestly, you can find it out. No, he did. I think he's also taken other comments down off social media. So I'm afraid, look, let's be clear here. You've got members, senior members of your party, stoking the flames here, and let's not pretend otherwise.
Well, let's be clear here.
Can you enlighten us as to what those comments were?
I genuinely don't know what the comment specifically was, but I think we're hearing a rattled political attack here. Because as a Jewish man, I feel the genocide very, very deeply. Imagine what it must be like to be a Muslim man and to see who could be your family and your relatives, to see how that's being behaved. Now, I want everyone to treat politics with sensitivity, with nuance, to bring kindness and compassion. I think the woman up there, spoke really powerfully earlier about bringing...
Can I just say, I'm a Muslim, and you're calling me a fascist. Are you going to extend that courtesy to me?
You absolutely are a fascist. You're from a far-right party. Right. You're Nigel Farage.
Let's just be clear about that.
Hang on, Zia, wait. I'm going to let Zach talk, and then I'm going to let you come in. Now, wait a minute.
Your concern about Muslims extends only so much as they agree with your political
I realise he's made an allegation. I'm going to let Zach talk, and then I'm going to let you respond.
Let's bring the receipts. Nigel Farage, he joined forces with the Swedish Democrats in the European Parliament. This is a far-right Nazi group. They want to deport people, not based on the colour of his skin, but from the places that they've come from. They also, Nigel Farage talks about it being the end of democracy because of the way certain ethnic minorities are voting. These aren't robust words, as Annabelle called them earlier, or we've heard on the conversation. This is racism, it's fascism, and we should call it out.
Zia.
OK, so what we want to do is support people on the basis of whether they are legally entitled to be in this country. That has nothing to do with race, ethnicity, nor religion. Now, let's talk. You accused me earlier, let alone fascist. You said that I was peddling disinformation. And I think people watching this programme at home, given the Green Party are right now, to be fair, they're surging in the polls, it's important that people know this. When Zach Polanski is making seductive claims to you, it's important that you understand, before he came into politics, he literally made money by charging women on the promise that he could literally enlarge the size of their breasts by hypnotising them. That is a true statement. And by the way, if you think that's insane, his policies are even more insane. He wants a world without borders. He wants open borders. He wants us to stand down and destroy our nuclear deterrent as Vladimir Putin belligerently marauds into Ukraine. He wants a communist economic system. He wants to legalise all drugs. And in Zach Polanski's version of Britain, his version of Britain, it is legal to sell fentanyl, crack cocaine and heroin, but illegal to rent your flat out. This is the most unserious person to enter British politics in my lifetime.
OK, listen, so I'm going to let you respond. There's a whole heap of things there. Do you want to start off with the hypnotherapy? Well, because not everyone may be aware of it, but as I understand it, you spoke to a journalist in The Sun who came to you and said, can you make my breast bigger through hypnotherapy? And you said, yes. And gave it a go.
I said no. And they said, would you be willing to do it as an experiment? I said, as long as you make it clear, it's not something I do, it's not something I charge for, it's absolutely
Zach, that's not true. I'm sorry, Zach. I'm sorry, I've got a correct record on that. That is not true.
And then actually, amazingly...
Hang on a minute. When you talk over each other, no one at home can hear. As I remember, you were quoted as saying, actually, loads of people might go for this because it's safer and cheaper than a boob job.
Right, so this was 12 years ago, before I was a politician.
Just giving you the chance to respond.
I think it's important to own when you've made a mistake, and I've owned that. It's 12 years on now. I think Tony Benn, one of my favourite politicians, said, I don't care where you've come from, I care where you're going. And what I want to ask Zia, if we're talking about people's past records, Nathan Gill, this is a man who was found guilty on bribery with the Russian state. Now, Zia said that Nigel Farage and Reform did not know who this man was. But Nigel Farage, including the day after Brexit happened, was pictured with 4 men behind him. One of them being former MEP for Reform, Nathan Gill. The man that Zia says no one knows who he was. So were you lying, or was Nigel Farage lying?
Zach, I'm afraid, if you want to use the word lie, let's be clear about something. You are lying. What I said is I have never met. I took over as chairman in the summer of last year. I will tell you, I have never met Nathan Gill in my life. I have never met...
Farage has met thousands of people. He doesn't know who this man is. So was that a lie?
I said he meets tens of thousands across the course of a year.
Okay.
Over the course of a year.
And Zach, is this believable? This sounds like
at the time that this guy was the Welsh leader, Reform was polling at like 1% in Wales. Listen, here are the facts of the matter. Reform.
Hang on.
I have never met him before. He is not an important figure inside Reform.
Because you're filibustering and everyone can
Nigel was not leader when he had a position inside
So was he stood behind Nigel Farage in the picture, or was he not?
Okay, I tell you what, hang on a minute.
This is about bribery from
Everybody
Russia.
there in the audience,
Nigel
can I just
Farage,
say,
my friend.
people in
It would
the
be
audience,
hundreds of
hang on a minute
thousands of
here. I appreciate you both feel really strongly about Nathan Gill. But I can see that people in the audience are going, you know, I'm not sure this is going to make an enormous...
bribery from Russia.
Right, okay,
For our national security.
Zach, you've made your point, but I think there's other things that the audience wants to talk about. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And me.
Right, where are we with time? All right.
Can I just ask you one very quick question? Do you think that it is helpful and conducive to having open and free discussion of often very contentious issues if you immediately launch into ad hominem attacks on anybody who disagrees with you? Rather than introducing people, shouldn't we actually discuss the very, very important issues at play?
I agree. I don't think this is an ad hominem attack. I think if it's bribery from Russia, that's a pretty serious...
All right, exactly. I think we think... No, do you know what? No, I'm not, Nigel, I'm going to stop you, simply because there's other questions this audience really want to ask, and they're not going to get a chance unless we allow them to get a word in edgeways. Emma Lentil, where are you? Have I pronounced your name properly, actually, first of all? Yes. There we go. Emma, off you go.
The welfare system should be a safety net and not a lifestyle choice. Who will be brave enough to sort this out?
So it sounds like, Emma, you're not very happy about it.
I think it's very easy for people to not go into work. I still think it's not very easy. I don't think it's getting any better under the government we have now.
James?
I think you're absolutely right, Emma, that people who can work should work. I think that should be a fundamental of our society. I think a lot of us would agree with that principle. And one of the things that we're conscious of is that a lot of people have been put on benefits and kind of written off. And they're just written off to many years or a lifetime on benefits and not helped to get into work. Even when they can work, even when with a little bit of support at the right time in their life, they would get into a world of work and then be able to hold down a job. And one of the things that we're doing is investing £1 billion over the next 5 years to help 300,000 people into work. Now, these are people who are out of the job market and not looking for work, but they can work and they just need a bit of help to get into work.
But
and
hang
that is crucial to make sure that they get into work.
The plan you had on benefits all went pretty pear-shaped because you were trying to save, what was it, $5 billion or something on welfare reforms. Then you had a massive rebellion, and so you decided, right, we'll just do 2.5 because we're not going to get it through.
Well, we took those reforms to Parliament, and people know what happened when we discussed it there. But
it all went rather horribly
what
wrong.
I'm talking about is the focus on getting people into work, because actually the best way to help crack this problem is to say to the people who can work and who should work, right, what do you need to get you into work? And actually, just today, we've launched one of the ways in which we're going to spend some of that money I spoke about earlier, which is getting people into GP surgeries to say they can meet people who are unwell and who are maybe on benefits and say, right, what do you need to get you into work? How can we help get you into work? Because the one thing which I think is just unacceptable is for us to say, as a country, as a government, you know what, if you're ill and you're not working, but you could work with a bit of help, we're just going to forget about you and we're going to pay you your benefits for years and years on end and we're going to write you off. That's what's unacceptable.
Nigel?
I know exactly what you're getting at, and it's frustrating lots and lots of people. Now, we were tackling bits of the welfare bill when we were last in power, and if any of you did watch Conservative Party conference, you would have seen that this was a core theme of Kemi's speech and what we've been announcing, because in order to get the welfare bill down, that is vitally important in terms of growing the economy and making sure that we've got stronger borders, the themes of our conference. The two come together, because we can only spend what we have.
It's probably worth pointing out is that much of the increase in health and disability spending happened under Conservatives, as you were in power a long time. Nearly £20 billion increase from 2019 to 2024.
Yeah. Well, and again, some of this is hangover from the pandemic, where we spent £400 billion out of necessity. The problem is the pandemic is having massive long-term consequences, and we need to help people into work. 6.5 million people are not able to work. But Fiona, forgive me because you've interrupted me, and you always do this on the show, and I never get to answer the question because I always end up answering yours.
Hang on, I can absolutely give you a chance after. Don't blame me, Nigel Huddleston, if you don't want to answer the question.
But the point here is it's really important because, look, our manifesto going to the next election and the announcements last week, we were able to make announcements on things like abolishing stamp duty, business rates relief. How and why? Only because we've done the hard work to say this is how we would pay for it, and this is specifically how we would be able to reduce benefits. Because, for example, there's way too many people who do need help and support, and one of the best ways you can do that is getting a job by making sure that they get back into work with, say, low-level mental health distress. So these are people with anxiety and other things. It shouldn't stop them from working, but also the whole thing here, they do need a job. This government is doing a terrible job, 180,000 job losses since they got power. Therefore, you need to spur on the economy. So I say we've got a plan here. You're making a really important point. It is so frustrating for people who see other people, their neighbours, whatever, have a better lifestyle than they've got on benefits. That's not right. It's not fair, and we need to absolutely correct that.
Woman there in the stripy top and glasses.
Hi. My question would be, when we talk about the welfare and the spend, in the last financial year, 48% of our spend was actually on pensions, and we're doing the triple lock, and every minister here is, every party is committing to that triple lock. How are we going to afford that moving forward? Are we going to work longer and longer? When are we going to make that question and go, is that sustainable?
And you think it's not sustainable by the sound of it?
No.
OK. Man in the stripy T-shirt and glasses. Yeah.
Oh, hi. My biggest problem with this is there is a massive stigma attached when it comes to claiming benefits, even when it's for the right reasons. So I think that if we can work to help people if we can overcome that stigma, then I think that we can start to help people get on the right benefits that they need, and that we can start to get things moving again in the direction that the country needs.
So government spending on health and disability benefits at the moment is set to increase to nearly $100 billion by the end of the Parliament, and that's bigger than the entire education budget, for example. Yeah. So do you think the welfare bill should be cut, or do you
I honestly think that it might need refocusing, but I definitely don't think it should be cut.
Who's laughing at that? Let's hear what you think, sir. I heard a kind of sort of yes. Yes.
I'm not trying to stigmatise anybody that struggles with mental health issues and struggles to find their place, whether it's in the workplace or in the world in general. But sadly, there is too much going out and not enough coming in, and there are some hard choices that need to be made. And I just think people need to be given the correct tools to know that they have options beyond, for example, being on long-term benefits. I think it's enabling people to make a productive and fulfilling, role in society.
Well, Emma's question was, who will be brave enough to sort it out? Do you think any of the parties you see here have got the answer?
I seem to get the impression from programmes like this and also TV in general, that parties seem to focus on fighting against each other and polarised opinions and bickering, rather than actually dealing with the main issues that people are worried about today.
OK. Annabelle, will be brave enough to sort out the welfare system as a safety net and not a lifestyle choice?
I'm not convinced that any politician of any stripe is willing to actually tell the public what is required in order to have a very necessary retrenchment of state expenditure. We simply cannot be in a situation where we are spending this year £315 billion on welfare. Around £70 billion of that is going on the state pension. And yes, we do need to look at the triple lock and reducing it to a double lock, which would be linked to inflation and to earnings. And we must look at out-of-work benefits. Politicians talk a very good talk about the welfare state and fairness and how it must pay to work, and yet they've created a system where the incentives are often for people to do the exact opposite. It is grotesquely unfair that you have examples of households who are on benefits bringing in more money than households where two adults are on the national minimum wage. That can't possibly be right. And yet, as we saw with the welfare row before the summer, Labour is simply not going to be able to take a scythe to our bloated welfare budget. The Tories presided over an enormous increase in welfare spending, and you just wonder where on earth the money is going to come from, because the tax burden is already at a post-war high. We've got over 50% of the population who are now net recipients of the state, and that just keeps ticking up and up and up and up. Who ultimately is going to be footing the bill? Because we've got a shrinking number of taxpayers at the moment. So currently, as I say, I don't think that any politician is really willing to come out and tell some genuinely hard truths. But perhaps at some point in the coming years, they won't have any choice.
So, the Green Party want to increase health and disability spending along with abolishing the two-child benefit cap. So you don't want to see it come down, you want to see it get bigger?
Yeah, Emma, so I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. The 4 wealthiest people in this country have more wealth than 20 million people. Inequality in our society is absolutely huge. In fact, there will be people who go to sleep tonight who can make more money than any of us could earn in an entire year. And many of you will have seen my party political broadcast that 10 million people have seen. And ultimately, what I'm saying in that broadcast is we need to be taxing the super rich, not plumbers, not hairdressers, not people who are trying to just earn a living and get by, but people who have huge, inordinate amounts of wealth. So when it comes to telling the truth and when it comes to hard choices, why is it always hard choices for our working class communities, for people living in poverty, for people who are working really hard but not being paid enough by a corporate company that they're having to take benefits despite the fact they're working? And why are these not tricky choices for multimillionaires and billionaires? We need to tax wealth and not work. It is time for a tax on the super rich.
OK.
Can I just ask, what do you think that the individuals who you would like to tax will do in response to some sort of measure like this? We're talking about people who are international, who are highly mobile, and who will not hesitate to move to another jurisdiction if the tax regime here becomes too unfavourable.
Good question, Annabelle. Thank you. So we're talking about assets,
welcome.
So it's very difficult. Glad we're being so polite. And it's good that we're not... you can't move an asset. So, for instance, the Duke of Westminster owns half of Mayfair. He can't just pick up Mayfair and leave. But also, I think we should be more patriotic about that than our country. I think people want to live and work and earn money in this country on their assets because they love this country, because they love our communities and the integration we were talking about. I don't think it should be some kind of corporate sink for people just to have wealth and own assets, which then if they don't want to pay into our NHS or don't want to pay into our education or invest in our communities, they say, oh, I'm going to leave. If that's the case, then I think we should be prouder of our country and wave them out the door. There's literally no evidence that a wealth tax would actually make people go. It's just something that's often propagated by high net worth individuals, because you can imagine why they might want us to think they're going to leave, because actually they don't want to pay 1%, 2% on their assets. I'm talking about 1% on £10 million or more, or 2% on £1 billion or more, which could raise between 15 and £25 billion that would drastically reduce inequality. Our communities are crying out for this.
Zia, so let's get, by all means you comment on that, but let's get to the question, back to the question. The welfare system should be a safety net, not a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, well, look, reform are very clear. We are on the side of people who set their alarm clocks before they go to bed and wake up early in the morning and go to work. And we speak to so many of these people across the country, regardless, people earning close to minimum wage, all the way through to people earning hundreds of thousands of pounds a year, who say to us, why do I bother? As has already been made, the point has already been made, there are many households in this country who literally take in more money, not working, than households who work. There's nothing about that that's remotely acceptable. And I'm sorry, Zach, we live in the real world. The British people I agree with you, there are so many people in this country who have real problems. But the only way we're going to solve those problems is understanding how the world actually works. We don't live in a world where, the fantasy world, where we can grow the size of women's breasts by hypnotising them. And the notion that a wealth tax, there's no evidence a wealth tax doesn't work.
France lecturing us about poverty.
Yeah. Hang on.
France. I'm a multi-millionaire who started with nothing and created hundreds of jobs, and I'm proud of that. And yes, I had luck. And here's my luck. You know the luck I had? Being born in the United Kingdom. An amazing, loving, welcoming country. They welcome my parents here, and by the way, has social mobility. One of the reasons I'm in this in politics is because I am so concerned that social mobility is on the wane, and there are so many young people in this country lacking opportunity. One of the problems that we have right now is that we have the welfare state is a runaway train that is dragging this country to bankruptcy.
So
many
what would you
times
do about
over.
it here? What is reform?
So here's
plan
the first thing we would
policy,
do. One in six, and I appreciate some of the audience here won't like it, but here is a fact. 1 in 6 recipients of universal credit alone are foreign citizens, and I'm afraid British taxpayers should not have to fund a food bank for the world. So we will make British welfare only available to citizens of the United Kingdom. That's
What about British citizens of British citizens? What would you want to do about the welfare bill?
Well, so that's the first significant saving we can make. The second thing we need to do, we absolutely need to materially increase the number of in-person assessments. I mean, a vast percentage of the new cars sold in this country every year are through the Motability scheme. And if you look at how many young people, probably the biggest tragedy right now that no one is talking about in this country is I think it's about a quarter of our young adults are signing on to welfare, and all of the evidence suggests that once they do that at such a young age, they never come off. We have to make work pay. One of the craziest things, Fiona, about politics in this country that nobody, the Tories over 14 years and Labour seem to want to do nothing about is the fact that if you are on benefits in this country and you say, you know what, I actually want to start working again, I want to start working again, whether you're young or old, you pay a marginal tax rate of north of 100% when you start working more than 16 hours a week. You literally have less money in your bank account if you're on benefits.
OK, can we just be clear, though?
And so let's fix
let's just be clear, though. I mean, you've talked about stopping universal credit for migrants in this country.
All forms of welfare, yeah.
What about welfare for people who are not migrants? As I understand it, I think, because either you have told me or Nigel Farage has told me, Reform wants to make significant cuts to the welfare bill for British people.
Fiona, we have no choice. Otherwise, the country is going to go bankrupt several times over. The cost of borrowing for the United Kingdom on a 30-year basis in the bond market is at multi-decade highs. And I will say this, there are many people, young and old in this country, who do need help from the state, who do need our welfare system to support them, and quite rightly too. And nobody will suffer more than them if we fail to make difficult choices to make sure that people who can work go to work and that work is rewarded. And that's what a reform government will do.
This is so much noise from you. I wish I'd see a detailed plan. It's pure populism without a detailed plan. That is not credible. Actually, we've got two parties here that just
well, you ballooned the size of the welfare state. You took steps...
OK, let him make a point.
You've just made that comment, and then Nigel Farage has come out and said that he actually wants to get rid of the two-child benefit cap. Choose someone.
For British people in work.
Stop trying to say everything to everybody. It's not credible. Are you big government or are you low tax? You can't be both.
We want to scrap the two-child benefit cap.
Stick to that position.
We want to scrap the two-child benefit cap.
You want to do everything, Zia, and of course you do.
That's what we want to do.
I get it, because, it's really popular. But that's not government. You need to be responsible.
Are you proud of your record with regards to the welfare
state? Your last manifesto had 140...
Hang on, wait.
Your last manifesto...
Let Nigel talk, then you can come back.
Your last manifesto had £140 billion of unfunded tax and spending commitments. Let me be very clear. We made mistakes when we were in government. Kemi outlined in her speech this week how we're going to go back to proper Conservative values and principles. Personal responsibility, low tax, small government, living within your means, so that then we can have a vibrant economy that generates the taxes to pay for the public services. You are going around, as are you, promising absolutely everything to everybody. It's really nice to hear, but you need to be an alternative government. You need a team around you who can deliver. And saying populist stuff just because people like to hear it, that is not credible. I need to get them out.
Let's talk about living within our means. Let's talk about living.
You have to be quick, Zia, because we're almost out of time.
Very quickly. Let's talk about living within our means. The Tory government in their 14 years ran a deficit in every single one of those 14 years, despite almost every single Tory chancellor promised to stop it. And you tripled the national debt and took the tax burden on British people to the highest level since World War II and made everyone's lives worse in the process. And that's why the Tory party is dead.
We're out of time. There's a man up there waving his hand desperately. I'm afraid we are out of time. I just wanted to say that we were also hoping to fit in a question about climate, because a number of you asked about that, and I have ran out of time to do so. Zach, I know obviously you would like to talk about that.
Absolutely.
I hope you will come back on the programme, and we will certainly try to fit that in. But for now, I don't know, I'm exhausted. I don't know about you. From Shrewsbury or Shrewsbury, depending on how you say it. From all of us here, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.